I will never forget that first day of school. As a senior student at Lakeside High, I was used to the anxiety and euphoria of a new school year. But that year, there was something sinister in the air, a cold silence that shrouded the laughter and chatter of my classmates. My name is Alex, and I am a typical 18-year-old student. Yet, what I experienced that semester is not something a teenager should ever have to face. It started with the disappearance of Jessica, a girl in my year. She was loved by all, always smiling and optimistic. When she disappeared, the school was in turmoil. The police searched everywhere, but they found no trace of her. Weeks passed, and then another student disappeared. Mark, the captain of the football team. It was a Thursday afternoon and he didn't show up for practice. After that incident, fear spread through the school like an uncontrollable fire. Rumors began to circulate that a serial killer was targeting Lakeside High students. The police intensified their investigations, but couldn't find any clues. Students began to disappear one after the other, and our school turned into a place of fear and suspicion. I started seeing fear in the eyes of my classmates. They avoided being alone, gathered in groups, like herds of sheep trying to protect themselves from wolves. It was a November night when I happened to be the last to leave school. I had spent extra hours in the chemistry lab for a project. I was walking along the dark corridor, when I heard a noise behind me. I turned and saw a dark shadow moving silently down the corridor. A chill ran down my spine. I started running, trying to reach the exit, but the shadow was getting closer. I finally reached the exit, but the door was locked. I turned around, ready to face my pursuer, when a dull noise echoed behind me. I turned and saw the school custodian, with a pair of keys in his hand. He looked at me with a worried expression and opened the door, letting me out. As I ran home, I couldn't help but notice the way he looked at me. A shiver ran down my spine. In the following days, I noticed that the custodian was often the last to leave the school. Always there, in the shadows, watching. And every time I walked past him, I felt a shiver down my spine. There was something odd, something dark. I wondered if it could be him, the killer who had terrorized my school. I decided to investigate. One evening, I decided to stay at school late. I hid in an empty classroom, waiting for everyone to leave. Then, quietly, I ventured into the dark corridors. I saw the custodian enter a storeroom. I decided to follow. What I would discover would change everything. I approached the storeroom silently, my heart pounding wildly. The darkness was almost total and I was moving blindly. Cautiously, I opened the door. It was a grim place, filled with old tools and cleaning products. But there, in a corner, there was something different. A locker closed with a padlock. Instinct drove me to pick it up. That padlock, so solid and cold, was an enigma that spurred me to find a solution. I shook my head, trying to stay clear-headed. I had no evidence, just a suspicion. But I had to know. After a sleepless night, I decided to break the lock. I had no choice. I took an old crowbar hidden in my father's shed and returned to school the next day, my heart swollen with fear and anticipation. I hid again, waiting for everyone to leave. When the school was finally empty, I rushed into the storeroom. The lock seemed to mock me, shiny and impenetrable. But I was determined. I positioned the crowbar and levered. With a dull noise, the lock gave in. I paused for a moment, adrenaline pulsing through my veins. Then, slowly, I opened the locker. Inside, there was an assortment of items that froze my blood. Photos of the missing students, newspaper clippings, personal items. And, in one corner, a pair of latex gloves and a blood-stained knife. I gasped for breath. The custodian was the killer. There was no longer any doubt. I took my cell phone, ready to call the police, when I heard a noise behind me. I turned and saw the custodian. His face was a mix of anger and surprise. I couldn't believe it was him, the murderer. But there was no time to think. He lunged at me, but I managed to avoid his attack and ran out of the storeroom. He was behind me, his heavy steps echoing in the dark corridors. I reached the exit and ran out into the night, calling the police on my cell phone. I didn't look back, not until I heard the sirens in the distance. The police arrested the custodian that night. They found enough evidence in his locker to connect him to the disappearances. Finally, the Lakeside High killer had been caught. But I will never forget that fear, that desperate run in the night. Because now I know that evil can hide where you least expect it, even in the most familiar places. And no matter how normal it may seem, evil can always be lurking, right under our noses.
My name is Lily, an ordinary college junior, studying journalism, unaware that I would soon be reporting a real-life horror story. Our campus was always buzzing, full of life and energy, but one cold November, the atmosphere shifted. Students became unusually silent and unease seeped into every corner. It all started with the disappearance of Melanie, a beloved drama student known for her infectious laughter and kind heart. The initial shock left everyone reeling. The police conducted their searches, but Melanie remained missing. Just when we thought things couldn't get worse, another student disappeared. Then another. Fear began to grip the campus like an unrelenting vice. It became increasingly apparent that we had a serial killer amongst us. The police ramped up their investigation, but leads were scant. Meanwhile, the students remained huddled in their dorms after sundown, too terrified to venture out alone. We were all on edge, but no one more so than me. My best friend, Jason, seemed to be the only one unchanged by the horrifying events. An English major with a love for Shakespeare and a wit to match, Jason was always the reassuring voice amid the chaos. His constant optimism was my solace during those terror-filled days. Little did I know, the comfort I sought was a mere illusion. One evening, after working late at the campus newspaper office, I headed back to my dorm, accompanied by Jason. We were halfway there when we ran into a group of terrified students, their faces pale. They had discovered a chilling message etched into the pavement: the night isn't safe anymore. As they scurried away, a chilling thought crossed my mind. The message was right under my dorm building. While Jason tried to dismiss it as a sick prank, I couldn't shake off my anxiety. That night, I barely slept, plagued by nightmares. The next morning, I woke up to find Jason sitting on the edge of my bed. He was there to check up on me, he said. His unexpected presence was oddly comforting, and I found myself grateful for his company. In the days that followed, I noticed that Jason was always there, an unexpected guardian. He was there when I worked late, walked me back to my dorm, and was ready to dispel my fears with his humor. His constant presence was my only source of comfort, but also raised a question: why wasn't he afraid like the rest of us? Driven by my journalistic instinct and the unsettling thought, I began to dig deeper. I started subtly probing Jason, trying to piece together a pattern. I learned he was often up late, citing his insomnia, and his alibis for the disappearances were always conveniently vague. With each passing day, my suspicion grew, but so did the absurdity of it. Jason? A killer? It seemed ludicrous. Yet, the pieces were beginning to form a horrifying picture. One evening, feeling like a detective in a crime novel, I made a decision that could cost me my life. Jason had a habit of going for late-night walks. That night, I followed him, praying that I was wrong. I trailed behind as he made his way through the dimly lit campus, finally stopping at an old, abandoned building. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched him enter. After a moment of internal debate, I followed him inside. Inside, to my horror, I found the evidence I had feared. There were personal items, scarves, hairbands, notebooks, all belonging to the missing students. And, most horrifying of all, a bloody knife. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Jason was the killer. I was in the murderer's lair. Before I could process it, I heard footsteps approaching. Panic surged through me, and I hid. The door creaked open, and in walked Jason. I had to get out. I had to alert the police. Waiting for him to move further into the room, I seized my moment and ran, the echo of my footfalls the only sound in the silent night. I made it to the police, my breath ragged, and the horrifying truth spilled from my lips. The disbelief in their eyes quickly turned into action as they rushed towards the old building. They caught Jason there, a smug grin on his face, as if he had been expecting them. The trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming, and the once beloved college student was sentenced to life imprisonment. The campus slowly returned to normal, but the shadows of the past always lingered. And so, I learned the hard lesson: monsters hide not in the darkness, but behind familiar faces. My best friend, the serial killer, a chilling tale I will carry with me forever.
In the quiet town of Clarksville, Tennessee, life was as peaceful as ever. People would wake up to the crow of a rooster, go to work, kids would go to school, and life would relentlessly carry on in its monotonous daily routine. However, an event was soon to shatter the tranquility of this small community. Lily Thompson, a brilliant teenager from Clarksville High School, was the town's rising star. As the daughter of the town councilor, she was known by everyone for her vivacity and love for knowledge. She was the school's pride and joy, adored by teachers and popular among students. However, one day, Lily didn't come home after school. Her parents, worried, started calling her friends, but nobody knew where she was. Shortly after, the police were alerted, and the entire town of Clarksville was faced with a startling reality: Lily had vanished. As authorities began to search for Lily, life went on at Clarksville High. The students were distressed and worried about their classmate, but tried to carry on with their daily routine. Among the teachers, there was one who seemed particularly affected by Lily's disappearance: Mr. Collins. Collins, a respected and loved history teacher, was known for his infectious enthusiasm and love for teaching. However, following Lily's disappearance, his behavior drastically changed. He seemed constantly distracted, anxious, and his brilliance in the classroom faded. One day, during a class, one of the students noticed that Collins was throwing away a red-stained handkerchief. It looked like blood. The news spread fast among the students and, despite Collins's protests that it was just red paint, the rumor reached the police's ears. Alarmed by this discovery, the officers decided to question Collins. During the interrogation, he seemed agitated and nervous, responding evasively to the investigators' questions. Faced with this suspicious behavior, the police obtained a warrant to search Collins's house. The discovery was shocking. In the basement of Collins's house, investigators found the lifeless body of Lily. The news of the discovery spread like wildfire in the town of Clarksville, leaving the inhabitants in a state of shock and disbelief. During the trial, disturbing details emerged. Collins had developed an unhealthy obsession with Lily. He had started to stalk her, follow her, write love letters that she had rejected. When Lily had rejected him, Collins had not accepted the rejection and decided to kill her. The story of Lily and Mr. Collins shook the entire community of Clarksville. It revealed a dark side of a person everyone thought they knew and demonstrated that evil can hide in the most unsuspecting of places. Lily's death left a deep scar in the heart of the community, a stark reminder that reminds everyone that no one is ever truly safe.